the things I love about these books here, they start off with they're kind of cool, but they make us think a little bit. They kind of make us think about, how we are as a church, and a lot of these I've actually thought about myself in some of these. So I'm going to read this story that it starts off with on pages 1 and 2, and I just want you to think about these stories, and has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been in this situation or felt this way? So we're going to be talking about grace in action. We're going to be in Ephesians and in Romans. Today are the two main sections of the Bible we're going to be looking at. So, but think about these things. All right, it starts off. I don't think I want to go to church today, Philip told his wife, Carol. In fact, I'm not sure if I ever want to go to church again. Philip and Carol had been married 6 months, and for the most part, they were happy. But church attendance was becoming an increasingly sore spot in their relationship. At first, Philip had agreed to join Carol's home church. Even though he had been raised in a different denomination, they both loved Jesus, and Carol's pastor definitely preached the Bible. The church did have a lot more rules than Philip was used to, but now that he was getting married, he thought a more disciplined lifestyle would be good for him. However, over time, Philip became disillusioned with the church, its leaders, and even his own faith. Carol didn't understand at all. Philip, we are expected to be there anytime the doors are open, she said. You know that. Philip sat back in his recliner, his eyes red and watery. His jaw muscles worked as if he had fought to keep his emotions under control. He shook his head. I'm tired, Carol. Tired of being expected to live up to a bunch of rules that I never accepted in the first place. I used to enjoy being a Christian. Now I wonder. Philip putting his head in his hands and said no more. Carol went to church on her own on Sunday. Wow. Ever been there before? Or known anybody who's like that?
It sounded like Carol was Baptist, and he might have been Methodist.
I mean, think about this though. I mean, how many marriages out there where there's couples that are two different denominations? I grew up in an area of Massachusetts, in Boston. It is probably 80% Catholic. You want to talk about a church full of rules? Oh boy, there's a church that's full of rules, and you got to know what them all are. I mean, they actually put kids through school just to learn all the rules.
It can also happen, well, like my son Lenny, his girlfriend.
Mama, read the rules.
Her mother, she's going to be living with Zena.
Yep.
Well, her mother is Catholic.
Yep.
Zena is Baptist. But she told me, her mother's 94 years old, but she don't act like she was old. And she said, if you guys take me to the Catholic church one Sunday a month, I'll be happy.
Yeah. And sometimes, there's compromise. And it sounds like here with this relationship that we just read, there was some compromise with this. And he agreed to go to her church. I don't think he fully understood all the rules and all those types of things. But, whenever you go from one denomination to another, there's some out there that I've been to that whenever I walked in there, I was absolutely shocked at all the different rules. I mean, you can't cut your hair. You have to wear a dress if you're a female. You can't do this. You can't do that. Just, wow. Just so many different. I just want to come here and worship God. I don't want all the rules. I just want to come here and worship God. But churches have rules.
When I was growing up, I had a neighbor, they lived, and they had 11 kids. She was Catholic.
Yeah.
She raised all of the kids, went to all Catholic schools, and Freddie went to there was a Quaker church up the street from us. He went to Quaker church. And it worked.
It worked for them. Yeah. And for some people it does work, and to some people it does. But, one of the things, and I like how it starts up the story. I don't know how much, and maybe as we read through this lesson, we'll see how this may apply. But, as we go on in this, the toxic faith is a real phenomenon. Toxic faith. Think about that. You would not think that word and church would go together. But it's out there. It is. I've been in churches where it's there. Toxic faith. When it comes from legalism and judgmental or oppressive church environments, or self-serving hypocrisy in leadership. Toxic faith is a spiritual poison that drains people, abuses them, and discards them like trash. It often produces cynics who reject the faith they once embraced. And when toxic faith is not producing cynics, it is cloning itself in the people it oppresses, creating carriers, people who spread the poison of legalism and judgmentalism wherever they go. Bad churches can be a virus. You know, a bad church environment can be a virus. You know, and it's hard sometimes whenever we're in the church, when we're in, and I think this is a problem with a lot of churches. Some of them don't recognize the fact that it's happening within their own church walls. You know, they don't realize it's happening there because I've grown up in this church. I've known this church. I've been going to this church for 10 years. Whenever a toxic person comes in and it slowly builds, it's a bad thing. And so we've got to be able to recognize whenever this happens. We've got to be able to stop. And as leaders, those of us that are in the church as leaders, we have to be able to recognize where those kind of things are happening and be able to say something. And you can say something as a Christian. You can say things nicely. You can try and point it out so that it doesn't happen. It goes on to say here, and I like this story here, and I think this is where a lot, some churches get caught up. Is in the book Toxic Faith, Stephen Arterburn tells the story of his grandmother, who in faith gave almost most of her modest income to various ministries within the church because she wanted people to know Christ. Sadly, some of the people that she supported took the money for their own gains rather than using it for the cause of Christ. These leaders, who are claiming to be champions of the gospel, turn out to be charlatans. Right? These unfaithful human beings who spent Nana's money had more faith in themselves than they did God. They relied more on their manipulation than on God's providence. They were more concerned about their own comforts than the people that gave them the money or the people that the money was intended to help. They built big empires for themselves, while my grandmother turned off her heater at night to save money in order to give more to the church. We have heard about churches like this.
Yeah.
All right? We have heard about churches like this. And it can happen to a small church or a big church. All right? I mean, how many people, I need $1 million for a new airplane so that I can spread the gospel, right? If you give $100, God will give you, all these things, all right? But even within the smaller churches, people, we give our tithes and offerings. We give our offerings to this organization or that organization or this or that, for whatever it is. And the leaders turn around and use it for something completely different. And that's what they're talking about. Being careful, being able to spot that. That's a sign that maybe there's a problem, right? Manufacturers can put caution labels on bug spray and everything else like that, but we can't put a caution label out here in the front church. Think about that. If you had a caution label on the front of the church, be careful, charlatans inside. Would you go to that church? No. Probably not.
And nobody would give the money.
Nobody would give the money, right? So we got to be careful. We got to know who's handling the money, who's dealing with it. We have a great person handling finances here, but if somebody else would step up, we got to be careful of these things. Or if we were to go to another church or something like that, these are all things to be looking at. And they're just telling us, and I think this is what he's just trying to get at is the fact that we got to be aware of it. It can creep in. It can creep into a church. It doesn't take much. Paul wrote in the book of Galatians to address the problems of poisonous teaching. Some people were teaching that in addition to believing in Jesus, a person had to be circumcised and keep the Jewish law to be saved. We all remember that, right? Galatians 2:11 through 14. And if I can get to it, where did I put that at? Galatians. I had it marked here, and then I took my marker out, and now I am in trouble. Gotta love it, right? But,
Peter and Barnabas.
Yeah, and we're talking about Barnabas and Peter. There it is. Yeah. All right, so if we look at Galatians 2:11 through 14, I'm going to go ahead and read it here real quick for us. When Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those belonging to the circumcision group. The other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy even Barnabas was led astray. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of them all, "You are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs?" He was living with the Gentiles, but yet trying to force them to follow Jewish rules. He would get upset because they weren't circumcised, or they weren't following whatever rules the Jews put down in order, what their customs and stuff for God were. But yet claiming to be a follower of Christ. Christ would not put conditions on us like that. So, the two well-known Christians who were temporarily poisoned were Barnabas and Peter.
Yes.
Right? So what did they do to demonstrate their toxic faith?
Well, they were adding to the requirements to accept Jesus.
Yeah.
They were adding to it, yeah.
Yeah, it's teaching.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We can't add to the Bible, right? We can't add to it. We can't take anything away from it. It's not like a military regulation. And I always love this one in the Army. You can add to a regulation, but you can't take away from it. This is the Bible. You can't add to it. You can't take away from it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
End of story.
God's word.
God's word, yeah.
More or less, they were saying that if you could obtain righteousness by obeying the law, then Jesus' death on the cross was useless.
It was useless. He was following the Jewish side of things, while teaching the Galatians something different, but you can't have both ways, right? So what did Paul do whenever he saw the hypocrisy of these two believers?
He called them out publicly.
He called them out in front of everyone. It says here in verse 14, "When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Cephas in front of them all." Right? We have to be able to call that out in our church. If we see something wrong, we got to be able to call it out. You got to be able to go to the person and say, "Hey, not good," right? And what do they tell? If you see something wrong in church, you go to the Christian
Yeah, directly.
directly, right? If that doesn't work, you go to the Christian with 2 or 3 witnesses. And then if that doesn't work, you bring them before the church.
That would be wonderful if it worked.
It would be.
It will work.
But here's the thing. It can be, right? It can be. So when we're looking for a church or we're planning to start one, we need to safeguard ourselves against this idea of this toxic faith. All right, we've got to set in, our rules, our boundaries, so we don't have this kind of toxic faith. All right, we build those safeguards by operating from a set of biblical core values. And if you remember the last week, we talked about these core values, right? And these core values keep coming up, right? And the results will be a healthy, wholesome fruit that is life-giving. All right, the church, our fruit, all right, our belief. So what are our core values? If we remember from last week, they wrote them down here again on page 23. Character in ourselves, honor to others, grace in our relationship, excellence in our pursuit, accountability to one another, and always, always, always glory to our God. If you're not doing it to glorify God, you ain't doing it right, so it doesn't really matter. Everything else is just horse pucky, right? Doesn't matter. If you're not going to do it for the glory of God, then you're doing it for what? Glory of self. If you cannot honestly say that this is for the glory of God, this is to better God's kingdom, then it's for you. And that's plain and simple, it's all it is. Whether it's money, whether it's a teaching, whether it's anything else like that, if it's not for the glory of God, then it is for your own personal glory, and therefore, it's trash. It has no purpose whatsoever, right? We don't need it at all. We just need to cast it aside. If we see somebody who's doing something where it isn't bettering the glory of God, then we need to confront them. Like Paul confronted Peter and Barnabas, we've got to confront them. We have to walk up and say, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what I see. Politely, correctly, biblically, and with backing. All right? I mean, if you're going to come up there and say, this is going against the Bible, this is going against Jesus, this is going against it, have your ducks in a row. Bring it to them. Show them. Sometimes, maybe they just didn't even realize it. You know, sometimes we do stuff just out of ignorance because we don't know any better.
I mean, this is just me, but we should check ourselves before we check others.
Absolutely.
Check yourself.
Yep. Well, you know what? I mean, again, like I said, I use a lot of military terms just because former military, and a lot of us may have been. You know, before you go into anywhere, you know, my commander, before you went down the command hallway to go talk to him, he had a big mirror in this command hallway, full-length mirror. Check yourself first. Never really thought about what I just thought, you know, making sure my uniform looked good. Check yourself. Is what you're going to go down this hallway for right? Whenever we walk into the church and when we're going to do something for the church, we got to check ourselves. Is it for God's glory or is it for our glory? We have to check yourself. That is a great point, Millie. I love that. You know, we have to. You know, accountability to one another. That goes right along with that. Is this for the glory of God? If it's not, then we need to account for each other. We need to step up and say something. I hope that was the ice machine. You know, again, grace in our relationship. If we don't have a graceful relationship with each other with God, then it's kind of pointless. So a lot of this has to deal with the fact that we have to check ourselves. All right? And I love that. Thank you, Millie. That was a great point. But how does grace protect us from the poison of legalism and judgmental attitudes? How does grace protect us?
Well, I think a lot of times we want to receive grace from others, but we don't want to give grace to them. So if we're using grace right, it goes both ways.
It does. It goes both ways. Because God gives us grace. Right? We don't deserve grace that God gives us. In any way, shape, or form. We don't deserve it.
Undeserved favor from God.
Yeah. So if He gives us grace and we don't deserve it, we had better be giving it back, right? We have to be giving it back. We have to.
Jesus told a story of that when he wrote a parable of that, when he said to the one about the man who was forgiven of his debt, that he went out and went to the man who owed him money. You remember money, I put you in jail. You gotta think twice. If somebody's giving grace to you, that's it.
Absolutely. The servant. The parable of the servant. And that's what he was talking about. You know, the servant went before the king who owed the king several hundred talents of whatever, you know, silver. And the king forgave him his debts and then turned around and went back and told the guy that only owed him a few pieces to get out. And condemned him for just that. If we're going to be given grace freely, we need to give grace freely. And that's the other thing too, is we have to give it freely. It can't be with conditions. We cannot have a little string hanging on to that grace saying, I'll give this to you if, what's the point? Right? God gave us grace free of charge. There it is. It's ours. Take it. Right? All we have to do is believe in Him. All we have to do is follow the Bible. Grace is ours. Not a whole lot there. So we don't go throwing around strings attached with our grace. So we're going to be looking in Ephesians 2, 1 through 10, and explaining how God's grace works in a Christian life. So, in Ephesians 2, 1 through 10, as for you were dead in your transgressions and sin, in which you used to live when you followed the way of this world, and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the Spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. Who's that? Anybody? Anybody? Who's he talking about?
Satan.
Satan, right? all of us lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of the flesh, and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath, but because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. Amen. Holy, this right here, 10 little verses right here, summed up my entire life. Summed it all up right there. I mean, I can still think back. I lived following the ways of this world. The ruler of the kingdom of the air spirit, now at work in those who were disobedient. Boy, I was disobedient. Gratifying the cravings of our flesh. By grace alone are we saved. Thank you, Lord, for that. Right? So according to Ephesians 2:1, what was the spiritual condition of the unbeliever? What is their spiritual condition? The ones we're going to go fishing for later.
They're spiritually dead.
They're dead in sin. That's what I wrote down.
Yeah.
Spiritually dead. Dead in sin. All right? They don't even know it. I mean, I didn't know I was dead. Did any of you know you were dead before you got saved? Didn't even know it. I just thought I was having fun. Seriously. You know, there were no rules, right? None. You know, Ephesians 2-3 describe an enslavement of a person who does not know Christ. Who controls the unbeliever?
Satan.
Satan. You know? What is the unbeliever's destiny? We all know that one too.
The wrath of God. Eternal.
Life of damnation. Right? A life in hell. A horrible life.
Unless there's repentance.
But if, as just an unbeliever right now, if you were to go, you're like, it's, you know, it scares me more than anything else. There's so many people out there right now that are sitting there going, I don't care. What do you mean, I don't care? I'm going to describe to you what hell is, okay? It is the worst thing you can ever do, and you're going to live it the rest of eternity.
Don't you think a lot of people say, I believe in Christ, I believe in God, and that's as far as it goes, and they think because they say they believe that they're good.
Well,
I think there's a lot of people out in the world that does that.
And if you remember, and a great point there, Ms. Todd, if you remember when we talked about this a week ago, in my sermon, we talked about whenever we get to the judgment seat of God, right? He's going to sit there, okay, you believe in me. Are you a sheep or are you a goat? Right? Are you a sheep or are you a goat? Because a goat is going to say, oh, I believe in God, I believe in Christ, I believe in God, I give my life to him, but don't live the life. You're a goat. You're going to hell. You give me a whole bunch of lip service, that's cool, I got it. I used to get that from my soldiers all the time. I get a whole lot of that. I already knew. You know when you're getting lip service, right? Well, you know it. You can see it in their eyes. You can see the way they act. Yeah, lip service. Hell's that way. You know? If you're a true believer and you are saved by grace, then you're not going to do any of those things, so it doesn't really matter. You're going to be a sheep. Welcome to eternity with God.
You're going to confess Christ.
And you're going to confess Christ. You're going every day.
Yeah, but see, the devil's gonna work on you double time after you accept Christ.
Oh no! Like I said, I know that for a fact. All right. Right after, and every single, and I know many of you. Almost, I hope everybody's had this at some. God opens up that next door for you. Whatever it is that God has for you, He opens up that door for you, and you walk through the door. Immediately, the devil seems to be like, yeah, I'm going to try and slam that sucker right on you. Right? You got that door open. God is welcoming you in. You're going to go walk through that door. The devil does not want that to happen. He wants that door slammed shut. He is going to fight that tooth and nail.
To this day.
Every single day. And every time you profess Christ as your Lord and Savior, the devil's going to try and change your mind. The devil's going to do something. Always going to do something. Always. Always. Going to try and find a way to get you to change your mind. This is where you got to be strong in your faith. You got to be strong with God. You know, this is where, when those times happen, you got to get down on your knees and just pray. You got to turn it over to Him. That's the only way to get through that fight. You're not going to win that fight on your own. Remember, we're talking about the armor of God. You're never going to beat the devil head on. You're not going to beat him. You can't. You know, all you can do is put on that armor of God, fall to your knees, and pray. I like that poster. I've seen it. I'm thinking about buying the T-shirt. I saw it on Facebook. It's a Christian soldier down on one knee with his sword out in front of him. And it says, you know, I'm not on my knees because I'm defeated. I'm on my knees because I'm praying.
Amen.
That's what we need to be. We're not on our knees because we're defeated. We're on our knees because we're praising Him, because He got that door open and He's going to get me through it. All right? That's what we need to be doing. And Ephesians 2:4-6 tells us what God did for us. All right? What God did for us, besides everything else. That list is going to be very, very long for me. But what God did for us? God made us what? Together with Christ.
Alive.
Alive. God made us alive with Christ. God did what? Us up with Christ.
Raised us up.
God raises us up. He lifts us up. You know? And God, what? With us and with Christ in the heavenly place.
He seated us.
He's going to seat us. After He gets done separating the sheep from the goats, we're going to sit with Him in glory, right?
Yep.
That's the goal. That's where I'm headed. Right? Verse 8 and 9 tells us how a person is saved. By grace through faith. That's the question I always get every time from my family. How can you have faith in something you don't see? Oh, I see it every single day. I don't know what you guys don't see, but I see it every day. He works miracles for me every single day. I got up out of bed. That was a miracle right there.
How many times have you been driving down the road and almost had an accident? Why didn't you have it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what, I don't remember where it was. We were driving somewhere, and in our own neighborhood. All right? Point in fact, in our own neighborhood last weekend, you guys all heard about the shooting in Fayetteville. 2 shootings last Sunday in Fayetteville. They were 2 minutes apart from each other. 2 minutes apart. At 5:22 p.m., 2 people walked into a house not 2 blocks from my house, opened fired on the house, killing somebody. All right? I leave my house normally every Sunday to come here to church if I don't have to pick up Misty. I didn't have to pick you up last Sunday. Or no, I did have to pick you up last Sunday.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have to pick her up, I would have left my house at 5:20, which means I would have been driving by that house that was shot up at 5:22. I would have been caught up in the middle of that. No doubts about it. God made it that I had to leave early. And I will profess that today. We missed that shooting. We didn't even know about it until after we got home, and I think Sarah saw a posting on it. Oh no, all the cop cars were laying out, and everybody was
With
lined
the
up on
yellow
our
tape.
streets.
Yep.
But like I said, we didn't know anything about what was going on, and we got home and started reading about it. God works in ways.
I have to share. Andy and I, we were dating, we lived in an apartment on Ramsey Street, and, one of the family members couldn't go to a State's football game. So they called me and said, we got an extra ticket, if Andy wants to go with you, you can go tonight. Cool. So we leave Fayetteville, go to the game, come home, comes back to the apartment, we go in. He normally would sit on his coffee table in front of the TV and play a video game. There was a shooting in the parking lot of that apartment complex. The bullet went through the center wall, across the coffee table, and where in the line of sight to the dining room chair, and landed embedded in the back of the dining room chair. And I said, God looks in mysterious ways.
God, he does. Like I said, He does a lot of things. I remember all kinds of accidents and stuff like that, just missing and stuff. God does a lot of things. A lot of people out there, non-Christians, will say, that's just luck. I don't believe in it. Yeah, it's a coincidence, it's just luck, whatever.
Luck is our blessing.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't believe in luck. I believe in the fact that God moves so that we are taken care of. That's what he does. God moves. It's through his grace. My faith in his grace that I am saved. I have faith because I see him everywhere I go. An unbeliever doesn't see him. They don't see. They see luck. They see coincidence. They see whatever. Until we get out there and show them, bring them, and let them see, then all of a sudden they'll realize all those things didn't happen just because of luck or coincidence. They happened because God intervened in their life in one way or another. God intervenes. All right. God does more than just accept us. He raises us up from our spiritual death and seats us with his Son. Grace is the favor of God that we don't deserve. And we all agree with that. We don't deserve his grace. We're all sinners. We're all horrible. We're all evil. But it's by his grace that we're saved and we can change. Because without that grace, we're not going to change. We're going to stay the same way we were. Right? So we should show the same undeserving favor to everyone who comes in contact with us. Grace is the only way to be born spiritually, and it is the only way to live spiritually. Right? Only through grace. That should lead our lives in everything we do by grace. Right? We will know how it is to recognize and avoid legalism and judgmentalism in others and in ourselves by grace. Right? If we live that way, through grace, we're going to recognize it. It's those that start to miss it. That's when you're going to see it. All right, so in practicing grace in our relationships, gotta love this one, right? We gotta practice. We don't just, it's not something you just do, right? You gotta practice this. Yeah, you gotta practice living in grace. You gotta practice being a good Christian. And every single day, you wake up, you do the same thing, right? Always. So practicing grace in our relationships. Romans 14, 1 through 18, Paul gives us the 4 guidelines that shows us how to live in grace. All right. I'm not going to read a page of sermon. So we're going to go through this a little bit at a time. All right. The first one is accepting others. We have to be able to accept others. All right. Accept the one who is weak in faith. All right. We have to accept those who are weak in faith. Now, I wrote a note here on myself, and I don't remember why I wrote it. Man, don't you hate when you do that? You write a note, and you're like, yeah, I put it in the margin because it was important, and now I don't know what it is. It says they are accepting, not dictating to freeing and loving others. So we have to accept one another, right? We cannot dictate to somebody. We can't dictate grace, right? We can't dictate love, right? So we have to be accepting to the ones who are weaker in faith, right? According